Welcome everybody. I am Sean Short. I work in curriculum development here on campus. I've been in curriculum development for a good about 8 years, and we just did this. So that's a little bit about me, for the most part. I'll talk a little bit more as we go on today. But why are we here with project-based learning? I'm hoping to answer a few questions here for you. First of all, what is meant by doing with PBL? And what is authentic PBL? And can we jump right to the beginning? If you read the introduction to my presentation, that's what we're focusing on a little bit here. We'll get to what that means with create. You're all familiar with Bloom's taxonomy, right? Pyramid-looking thing. We've organized it into a pyramid today, but that's what we're going to be kind of focusing on today a little bit. So I say that I'm a curriculum developer now, but this picture I think just depicts a little bit more of really who I am. I come from a little bit of a diverse background and kind of walked through a little diverse path to get to where I'm at. And in that path, I learned a lot about the way people learn and the way people teach. A lot of times there's not an alignment. And so, which is what drove me into education. But this is an actual picture. My wife and me, we've been married 16 years now. This is when we were engaged, and that really was our first house and car. We knew each other before our mission a little bit. We were pen pals growing up. And I got home from my mission and had to break off an engagement that she was in to sweep her up for myself. But I was broke. Her brother hired me to build a house for him and his friends, a couple of houses down in Blackwood. Actually, there was in Blackwood. Yeah.
Okay, I grew up in Shelley. So.
Yeah, you taught in Shelley. Your brother did. He taught seminary.
Oh, awesome. My dad's counselor there at the high school and taught seminary for a while. My dad taught seminary the whole time until I got old enough to take seminary. And when you're that old, you want, like, your whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he quit teaching seminary.
Yeah,
I was counselor.
Yeah, well, maybe you were lucky you didn't.
I know. I'm thinking now, what was it?
Yeah, so, I had a neighbor here that had a car sitting out in the field, so you can get it running, it's yours. So we went and drove it out of the field and got it running, and my dad said the same thing. He put a motor in my motorhome, needs a new engine, and we'll let you have it for the summer. So that was our first house and first car. And but where I came from, I moved around a lot when I was a young child, or just growing up in general. About every 6 months to 2 years of my life, Dad was chasing jobs. He was actually the clerk up here at the Teton Dam when it broke. So you go down to the museum, a lot of those pictures or pictures he took with the company camera while I was up there when it broke. But so his job floated down the river quite early. And they transferred him over, and then ever since then he was chasing jobs. But we ended up my freshman year of high school in BYU-Idaho, up north, and got to about my junior year of high school, and there wasn't a whole lot they could offer me more than just spending the rest of my days out in shop. And got through all the math classes that they offered, and science and things like that. I could take another science class, I guess, but around that time, family needed help, needed a head mechanic at the family ag business, and so I actually dropped out of school when I went to a private distance school, took their graduation exam about 4 months later, and missed it by 3 points, and then got busy at the shop. And didn't go back. Finally went back my actual spring of my senior year. It would have been my senior year, and finished up a high school equivalency to Clark State College. But I always had my sights, especially at that time, on engineering. I went to serve my mission, came back, got married, we got pregnant, started school, a little backwards, but that's the way it worked for us.
Those two things.
Yeah, and got into engineering school with a minor in business and this material science things. But I got along as I went through school and through this pathway of how we learn. I noticed this big gap in education. One of the gap was all these brilliant people that I worked with in the shop who would make much better engineers than the science and math whizzes that they were sending to engineering school, right? But they didn't know it. The guys on the shop didn't know it, and the math and science guys didn't know how tough engineering was. They were in this abstract world, right? And had a real hard time creating abstracts to real life, which is what an engineer does, okay? And so I saw this gap, and I also saw the engineering professor saying that same thing. Send us the guys from the shop. We can teach the rest of the people. We can teach math and science when we get up here. It's really hard to teach those practical skills. So I saw this gap in education, and it sparked an interest in me to be a part of bridging that gap. And so I spent my career as an educator involved in student organizations, a lot of NASA programs, where taking students down to camps and things like that, and trying to integrate as much as I can real life into education. And that's kind of been my education background. So the last 8 years I've been behind a desk, though, mostly writing curriculum for distance programs, and we're doing a lot of partnership and outreach for Idaho. Worked for Idaho District Branch for about 3 years and built a lot of programs for them. And so if those of you familiar with Idaho, familiar with Idaho Science and Industrial Scholars, so that's one program I was a founding member of. And a Future Cities program, which is for 6th through 8th graders. So actually, I love that. And the reason I love that, and this is one of the things I latched onto early on, is that instead of sending students through through abstract skills, right, teaching them in the abstract, things that they're going to have to apply later. Okay, why not focus on the application first, right, or the creation first, right? Focus on the context, put things in context, and that's where my education philosophy came from. This is my family now. And I show you this. I'm the ugly one of the bunch, as you can tell. But I show you this because a lot of my education philosophy also came from observing my kids and the way that they learn. I guess I'm kind of Freud and others in that same sense, except I didn't experiment on I didn't publish any of my experiments. But anyway, this much. So our oldest is 15 now, and down doing some lifeguard training for the local pool. So I'm excited about that. And we got Kamora and Shem, Peter and Phoebe. And this was just taken last summer. So this is us now. So how do we learn? And I apologize for those of you on Hangouts. I don't think anybody's monitoring it. We'll have a couple of ways you might be able to interact here real quick, but hopefully you can hear me, and we've had some technology issues, but hopefully you can interact here. So how do we learn? This is the way we're taught, or one of the ways. I mean, there's a lot of philosophies that we learn in education, right? But Bloom's taxonomy is one of those sacred things in education that everybody attaches themselves to, okay? And, when we get this sense of, that we have to climb through these cognitive levels, right? We focus on the cognitive levels, right? One of the things we forget about, though, is that Bloom's research, had 3 domains in its research. You have cognitive domain, right? And then we have the affective and psychomotor domain. The affective is, your emotions, psychomotor is your psychomotor, your body and physical skills and things like that. The affective and psychomotor should be interlaced in all of these things. But in education, a lot of times we focus on these cognitive levels. In fact, we write lesson plans and we write activities, and we even label them, right? Label them with one of these levels, right? Say, oh no, this is a remember cognitive level, right? And we forget that these affective and psychomotor things really should be interlaced all throughout. And that's part of Bloom's research. But in education, we've latched onto this pyramid, and that's the problem with the pyramid, is that it's given us this sense of having to climb through the ranks. If I do really well down here with worksheets and and memorizing things and really understanding these concepts, right? Then work up through all of these levels, then maybe we'll do this really cool psychomotor, fun hands-on activity, right? You'll see that a lot in education. A lot of this is like it's like teaching your kid how to walk. We Bloom's taxonomy to teach our kids how to walk. Kids don't do that. And it's like, hey, Dieter, here's an image of all of the muscle groups and the ligaments and everything in your leg, and they all have to work together for you to walk. So go and memorize this, and come back and memorize all these muscle groups and tell me how they work, right? We keep repeating that, and we throw out some videos and all kinds of cool multimedia to them, right? To help them understand all of these things, how all this has to happen for a person to walk. Right? And then we're walking through applying and draw me a picture of what you learned. How do these things have to work together? How does this person have to walk? Right? Analyzing. Dieter, here's a case study of a boy that's been trying to walk, and he just hasn't got it. Right? Go and analyze. Go to your River Baby study group and give your opinion about why he couldn't walk, and listen to everybody else and respond to people. Right? And then you get to evaluating, everything you know. How are you going to, what changes are you going to make for yourself to make this work for you? Right? And then finally we get to create. And all along the kid's saying, Dad, can't I just walk? Like, walk already, you know what I mean? Like, no. Like, how do you expect to walk if you don't understand all of these basics? Right? You got to understand all these basics first, right? You got to understand the history and what everybody else has done to learn how to walk. Okay? And then finally we get to let them walk. It's not how a kid learns how to walk. That's not how we learn a lot of things in life. The more natural way of learning is right here, focusing on the create. Okay? And when we say create, why do we create? Okay, let's go to our Father, God Himself. Why does He create? What's the purpose of creation?
To serve us.
To serve. Why?
You want the standard to bring about the eternal life of mankind.
Yeah, right. So, when he was teaching Christ how to create this earth, he said, here's matter, unorganized. Go ye down and create an earth, right? Is there man on earth? No. Let's put man on earth, right? We all were presented, we had all progressed at a certain level. Hey, we need another level of progression, right? What are we going to do about it? Brought us all together and planned it out. Okay, creation is designed to solve problems or resolve conflicts, right? And so if we take create and put it in the center, okay, that's all we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about focus on the conflict that needs to be resolved. Okay? And then set about resolving it, or let them go about resolving it. And how many of you can sit through an entire season of some show on holiday weekend or a weekend? And on a Saturday, you can bust through a whole season, right? How can you sit in front of the TV for 8 hours? How do you do that? Like, you can't sit in this presentation for 8 hours. So how do you sit in front of it and watch a whole season of a show, or do an Avengers marathon or something over the weekend? What keeps you enthralled?
It's entertaining.
Screen.
It's entertaining. There's a lot of entertaining things that I can't just sit around for 8 hours.
It's true.
I crossed it when I sit.
That's okay. That's good.
I can't. I don't understand how my children can. I'm like, seriously, get up.
Well, let's drop it down. I can sit through a 3-hour or 2.5 hour.
You know what? I'm an educator, and it's good for us to take classes because I have to get up and move. So I have to have my students moving because it's boring.
I agree.
You're not engaged. You're not connected. You have no purpose. It's not something maybe you love, or it is, whatever.
But there is an underlying purpose in our natures that draws us to it. Okay? It's the conflict. Every single episode has a conflict, and you can't turn off that episode until that conflict is resolved. Right?
And they lead into each other.
Every season, right, has cliffhangers. Every season has these subplots with conflict that you have to watch the whole season, right, to resolve this conflict, right? And it's an addiction. Like, you can't put it down because this conflict's not resolved, so I got to keep watching the season. Right? Even though there might be some other things in the season you don't care about, you ignore it and go through it because you got to resolve the conflict. Okay, that's a natural tendency. We as humans are hardwired to create. solve problems and resolve conflict. So one of our purposes of life is to come down and learn and grow and create. Okay, solve problems and better ourselves and better the universe. Okay, so let's focus on create. Here's a model that I like, and there's actually a link here too. So if you want the PowerPoint, I've got a link at the end of the presentation. You can download the PowerPoint. But there is a link here, and sorry you can't see it very well on this
It's
projector.
Flipping Bloom's taxonomy.
Yeah, Flipping Bloom's taxonomy. It's Flipping Bloom's taxonomy. No, but anyway, that's the website. If you go to the website, there's a lot of examples of this idea. You know, how do you focus on create? How do you focus on resolving problems and things like that up front? In all disciplines, so they have English, math, different ideas there. Okay, you focus on create, and the rest of the Bloom's cognitive levels fall in place on top of that, right? Now, this is a different model that I really like better, and it's similar to one that I created. I'll show you here in a minute, a few years back. But I like this one actually better than mine. This is, put the create gear as the main gear that turns all the rest, right? You focus on create, you put the little, crank on create, right? It's going to turn all the other gears, right? All of these things are going to fall in place. How does a kid learn how to walk? They try it, right? They start walking. Okay, they have a conflict. Everybody's walking. I'm not walking. My pinky's on that couch over there. And nobody's getting for me, right? I got to get that thing. Okay, I got to figure this out, right? There's conflict, and it's not resolved until they learn how to walk, right? And they start trying things. Okay, how do all these other things fall into place with the walking? Right? We don't sit down and do a lot, but every once in a while we help them along. Right? We show them some things, we hold their hand. But for the most part, kid grabs himself, stands himself up on the couch and starts walking across the couch, right? Without any instruction. Okay, because they have this problem they have to solve. And all of these things happen, right? They try it out, they learn some things along the way, they're analyzing what's happening, they're evaluating, saying, that didn't work, that hurts, I'm done falling on my bum, what am I going to do to solve this? This one time I tried this thing and it worked, so I'm going to try more of that. They have this natural learning process of learning how to walk. By trying, creating, to remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, it's coming naturally. It's just happening. Okay? Because they have this natural desire to resolve the conflict. Okay? And they go through and get to work and try it out. Focus on create. So we spin put the crank on create. All the rest of Bloom's falls into place. And then here's a similar one, since we're talking about Bloom, direct draw flower. Similar to one that I created several years ago. Mine was more of an eagle with the spokes or whatever, but the idea is focus on create, everything else falls in place around create. Okay, so what is problem-based learning? And how do we focus on create? There are a lot of different forms of problem-based learning. I actually didn't do a good job of defining problem-based or PBL. Have you heard that term PBL before? Right? Sometimes people use it for project-based learning, okay, or problem-based learning. We're focusing on problem-based learning today. I'll tell you why right now. Or in just a minute, sorry. But what is problem-based learning specifically? Is this an example of problem-based learning? Throw in a project, problem solving. What would you call this?
Bloom's taxonomy.
Maybe, yeah.
So what is problem-based learning?
Post-assessment?
Yeah, or post-assessment. Yeah, I call this problem-based assessment. Okay, right? Project-based assessment, right? And so, you throw in this problem, and again, that's Bloom's taxonomy. You're running through all these worksheets and memorizing things, and then finally you get to this, the high students or the students that can, that perform well with all the other stuff, and then you give them a project, right? Or you send everybody through the project, and some people are unsuccessful because they didn't do good in the other things, right? And we think that means that students are separated. Well, it's not really necessarily that they're separated. It's just that the method of learning up to that point to get to that project didn't fit all the students. Right? This is not natural. Right? Our natural way of learning is not walking through a pyramid of steps. Right? It's focusing on resolving conflict and problems in our life. Right? So yeah, I call that PBA. So what is PBL? There's a couple of things I'm going to note here that really differentiate problem-based learning from problem-based assessment for other things. One is you present the problem or conflict up front. That's the first thing they see, right? And you tell this story, you put it in a story, whatever you want to do, right? And the more real that story is in their life, especially if they get to create that story or identify that conflict or problem, right? The more engagement you're going to find. Right? So present the problem or conflict up front. And then the learning path is the path to resolving that conflict. That's problem-based learning in essence. There's a lot of different ways that we can do this, right? Projects are great. And projects are really nice because they make it easy for us to put constraints in the project that help guide toward the objectives and the outcomes we're looking for, right? You know, we need to build a bridge, but we're teaching budgeting, right? So we have to build a bridge, but really the idea here, the objective here is budgeting, right? Working within a budget, so we throw in the constraints. You get so much money, you got so many people you got to pay, and you know what I mean? You throw in all of these constraints. So projects are great because you can put the constraints in there to build toward the outcomes you're looking for, which is awesome. But other ways, definitely do it. Gamification. And I want to differentiate this from gaming. The gaming is gaming, right? You're learning by playing the game. The gamification is taking a lot of the principles of gaming, you know, that games have, that we learn from, and that engage us, right? And bringing them into education. So what are some of those things? So gamification means, you know, putting things in like, you know, a clear objective, a clear outcome, staging things out, right? You know, you have different levels, so there's leveling up. There's a lot of opportunity to fail and learn from your failures, right? It's a safe environment to fail and learn from those failures. There's a lot of different things with gamification that we can bring into education, right? But it's all centered around, you know, problem-based learning, meaning that there's some kind of a conflict that needs to be resolved to solve this level or whatever, right? So it's a form of problem-based learning. We're wrapping these gamification principles in. Storytelling, we talked about it a little bit, right? This comes into play especially in subjects that aren't skills-based type things, right? We want to learn Romeo and Juliet. Okay, there's, you know, maybe you can put projects in there and things like that, but storytelling can do just the same thing. You throw them into a story, you know, Romeo and Juliet love each other, the families hate each other. You know, you've been hired as a conflict negotiator to come in and help these people, you know, create a peace treaty, right? Something, you know, I mean, you can put them in the story, create a story, let them even identify the conflicts, right? And if they can identify the conflicts, you're going to get a little bit more engagement. Okay? So focus a little more time around the story and around the conflict of the story, and then set them loose to resolve the conflict. Okay? They're going to be engaged. And it can happen quickly. I mean, it can happen with a paragraph of text. It can happen, you know, with a full day's worth of work to analyze the conflict, right? And it can happen quickly, or it will be long. But the idea is that we focus on that conflict and that problem up front, get people engaged in that, and they're going to naturally want to go out and learn what they need to learn to resolve that conflict, right? Inquiry is something you use in science quite a bit. You know, inquiry is a big thing in science. Do we have any science people in here? Math? Good math? Okay. Math, I mean, that's a term that math and science people use. Science especially. And instead of saying, hey, you know, this company, instead of telling the story, this company, you know, threw all these chemicals and it killed all these in this, you know, ecosystem, and it killed all the microbes, and the ecosystem died, you know, whatever, that type of thing. You know, you put them deeper into that story where, you know, what happens? You know, this microbe died, maybe for some reason. What would happen to the ecosystem if this microbe died? You know, if it's right here, what would happen to everything else? You know, that type of thing. And so you dive them into the story, and then you can write your own story if you want to. But inquiry, it's you know, same thing, posing a driving question, and then, you know, there's several others that we can certainly discuss. Is that clear? So the rest of the time, what I'd like to do is discover this. You know, how do we incorporate this? And especially with this audience, with us, we're all instructors, right? We're not instructional designers necessarily, maybe you are in other life. I've got you, how many are educators in your other life? You're all, okay, that's great. So, so how do we do this? I was going to show you this real quick video. Kind of fun. As we get into this, I had a few more interaction things here. We're not going to mess with those. Maybe some of you have seen this, but as we talk about how do we do problem-based learning, this might help us ease a little bit of our concerns with problem-based learning.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello! There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something? I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
No, well, there's not enough left to do. So.
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he could fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I move to the music, step to the beat. I
That's fun. That's a fun little deal. So, how often do we, sometimes we think about project-based learning and these other things, and I'm sorry. Back to the deal. We get a little scared. As educators, we get into a comfort zone. We write our lesson plans at the beginning of the year, or things like that. We get into this thing, and it's easy to let our curriculum kind of drive itself, and we want to do that for management purposes, right? Problem-based learning, or so we think, project-based learning, especially, it takes some time, right? You got to be involved. You got to be, you're more of a facilitator, you're more of a mentor, more of a tutor kind of a role, not a lecturer, and coming out of that zone that we get in sometimes as educators is kind of scary and tough, right? So how do we do this? This is what we want to talk about right now. And we have not another 10, 15 minutes here before we need to head over to the next session. But what I want to do, and we're going to do this online, but since we're a small group here, maybe we'll just throw something out. We'll just throw them out on the board here. But now, thinking about us as educators, one of the big questions that came to my mind in this group is, what does this have to do with us as online educators? We don't write the courses. Courses are static. Right? How can we take some of these problem-based learning principles and rope them into our courses to help the experience of students, student experience in our courses? Right? That was one of the questions that I had. So I'm going to write that up on the board. Right? How does this work? How do we? I was going to say PBL, right? Static online courses, right? So that's one question, conflict that I might have. But what other questions do you have with problem-based learning? They were still lingering.
I teach family history, and it's a really new program.
Uh-huh.
And the course that I teach is actually set up just like you're talking about, where we give them a story and then they have to, you know, figure out how to answer the questions based on the story. So just like you're talking about, it's set up that way, which is fabulous. But I've got students like the escalator that are just standing there. What do I do? We haven't learned this. How am I supposed to get through this assignment when we haven't even been taught what we're doing?
Right.
And I just try to tell them, you're gonna learn by doing it. And that's kind of how some of these assignments are, is learning by doing, at least in family history. And so I'd love some suggestions of how to help them know that they can move past, they can walk up that escalator, you know?
Right, perfect. I like that. Any other conflicts, problems?
I teach English.
Okay.
And it's a required course. And I get the students, they're like, this is stupid. Why do I have to take this course? I'm an engineer student. I don't need English. And I'm thinking and I do this in my classes sometimes, when we have the assignment, I say, what is the point of why you're doing this? Why are we making you do this in this week?
Okay.
And I think that, I don't know how other classes are set up, but we have notes that we have to set up every week. So I have control over that.
Notes from instructor, everybody has, right?
So I could start my first week with, here's the goal of this class. Here's the end result of where you're going. And how do you learn to do this? That's what we're going to teach you in this class. Would that be problem solving? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's a very good point. That's a very good suggestion. So, you know, how can we use our notes from instructor? That's one tool that we do have access to as online instructors, right? How can we tap into that, right? Any other problems or conflicts we want to put on the board up here? We'd like to resolve in the next meeting.
Well, I think I would like to know how to use the discussion board better to introduce the conflict, you know, so the students become a little more
Active. Amen to that. What do you teach?
Math 100 L.
So you have discussion board with that?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Okay, so how can we use the discussion boards better within the parameters that we have within a course, right? We can't totally rewrite the discussion board, but we can certainly have control over it, right, somewhat. So how can we better use the discussion board as instructors in a static course to incorporate some of these principles of problem-based learning and engage students there? Okay, I think these are excellent questions and problems to resolve, conflicts that we can resolve here. I don't know that we'll resolve all of them, but what I'd like to do is have you kind of self-select a group, right? Take a problem that you want to just zero in on and zero in on that problem. And let's discuss that. Or we could go another round and just all of us as a group take one at a time and we get through what we get through.
I like that.
All right, you like that idea? Take as a group, walk through.
Work down the list.
Okay, start at the top, work down the list. All right, what ideas do we have then? How do we do? This was mine, so I'm going to start here. We'll come back to mine, unless you want to start here. You want to start with mine or?
It almost is like those three answer yours.
Yeah,
You know,
I agree.
Once we figure out some of these basics, then that lends itself.
I agree. It's perfect. In fact, these were kind of two things that I was hoping you would lean for to help answer this question, because those are the places where we have some control, right?
Right.
As instructors. Okay, so how do we get students off the escalator? So again, post your question.
Yeah, so
You have a problem-based
we've got
course,
this problem,
right?
and the students haven't learned the concepts yet because we're not doing the pyramid, we're doing the backwards pyramid.
Right.
And so they're saying, I don't know how, I haven't been taught. And throw their hands up, oh well, can't do it.
Right. I don't have time to think about this. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right? I'm working full-time. I've got 5 kids.
Yeah.
Right? I don't have time to think. I don't have time to think, right? That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, one thing I was thinking, I don't know if you have this option in your class that we have in math, but our math is set up to have a really safe environment because it's like their first math class, this one. And so I can send my students the feedback. I can just kind of say dig in, and then I can send it back, and then they can still return that and get full credit. You see what I'm saying? So if they mess up, they send me a spreadsheet that's totally crazy, then I can get on and say, this is where we went wrong, this is, see what you think about this with your budget, whatever. and then they can still resubmit it. And I don't know if you have that option in your class.
I could give that option, but because I'm not a pathways class, like I'm full on my
Right,
associate's degree class,
right,
it's not recommended
Right.
because we've got to hold a higher standard
right.
for the quality of work. So I don't,
Can we ask open-ended questions to get students engaged?
Yeah, it's a great idea, and real quick, a couple of thoughts here. One is that that's part of the problem, is the open-ended question, right, the students run into. They don't have clear, at least in their mind, the objectives of this assignment, where this is going, what are you asking them from me, is not really clear. And that's tough, because they're used to an education system that is, do this and get through, right? And so that's one of the problems with one of these, to get them off the escalator stuck, right? How do I get off this escalator? Okay, so it's transitioning students from this education system where escalator being fed things, right, to knowing that they can have some autonomy to solve these problems, and that there is no right way to do it, right? Does every kid learn how to walk the same way? Absolutely not. As many kids as there are in this world, there's different ways that we learn how to walk, right? So,
Doesn't that boil down to the teaching of love and logic principles? I do it constantly. Bummer, that must have been frustrating. You're stuck on the escalator. How are you gonna solve that? You'll have to let me know, And it comes back to the open-ended questions, but it's always the empathy with the frustrations, and then what are you gonna do to fix this?
absolutely.
Are you able to do that in your course though?
that's all I can do. That's all I can do, is just write them back and just say,
Like, what do you think?
yeah, just do your best, and I'll give you feedback when you submit your assignment, and maybe next week you can take that feedback.
Are the
and-
materials made readily available to them, like, even if you haven't covered it
Oh,
yet?
yeah,
It's
I mean,
somewhere over there,
like,
they just haven't taken it.
like, I took these classes as a student, and I aced them. It's very possible.
Okay. So they're just lazy.
They're just lazy.
All right.
No, I object. Don't say they're lazy.
Oh, you don't tell them that.
No, you don't think that. You don't think that. I've worked at risk for years. As instructors, we have to not judge the students.
Unengaged
They
does not
will
mean.
know you were
Right,
thinking
right,
that, no
right.
matter what you say.
Okay, what would you call that then? Because
They're
that's our
just-
issue. We gotta
They,
fix.
okay, they are unengaged, but
Okay,
maybe,
engaged, whatever.
but maybe they're unengaged because I've worked with kids,
Well,
you know what I
or,
mean?
or they're occupied. I mean,
They're
Go ahead,
stuck, they're stuck in a specific mind shift, a specific paradigm.
They need the life
Where
skills.
they think they're required to stay on the escalator.
Yes, yes.
Because of education today, they're so accustomed to getting, like, where I am now is worse than anywhere I've been before on the reservation. Where I had honors students who were used to getting the worksheet, goofing off, doing the worksheet in the last 2 minutes of class, and then leaving. There was no, and then, by the time they got into, I taught mostly junior high. And so by the time they got into like junior, senior level high school honors classes where the teachers do an analysis of this novel, they had no idea what to do. They'd never been taught to think for themselves. That Bloom's thing, they never got to the create stage. I have the Pathways 120, where a lot of them are successful, have had careers or multiple careers even, but they haven't had the academics, and they usually are really good about problem solving. And all you have to do is, fill in some of the gaps. But there's others that, fresh out of high school, that they're like, you're giving me this problem, but you're not giving me answers. What do I do? So what I have done in the classroom and online is I explain to them, I teach them, that's why it's a student-based program. I'm not really an instructor, I'm more of a guide, I'm your assistant. It has to be that paradigm shift. I hate saying it that way, but it has to be that paradigm shift for them to understand they need to have responsibility. They can't look to us to be in charge. They have to be in charge.
So to get back to this question, how do we get students off the escalator? I love the example of Karate Kid, Miyagi, right? Karate Kid has a problem. He wants to learn karate. He sees this mentor that he wants to learn karate from, right? So he's teaching karate. He says, okay. And then what does he do? Yeah, he goes and puts into work on all these things. Student doesn't, does Karate Kid see why he's doing all these things? No, he doesn't. But eventually, right, he does. He comes and says, okay, show him standing floor, right? And he kicks him and he blocks the punch, right? Or blocks the kick. So, so to get to this, how do we get him off the escalator? As instructors, we have notes from the instructor, we have discussion boards, we have some of these tools at our disposal, emails and whatnot. We need to maybe paint the picture for him a little bit. Paint the vision. Where is this going? If it's not clear in the story of what the actual outcome, the educational outcome is of this, why am I doing this? What am I learning from this? Maybe we need to paint that picture for them a little bit. But sometimes we might need to let them go down that path a little bit before we can really paint that picture. Okay? And so, for instance, and I don't know what kind of stories you might have with family history, right? I don't know if it's like case study type stories. Yeah. So case study type stories, right? Case studies are great, but not everybody relates to a certain case study, right? And so maybe it's getting students engaged in some of their own stories. Maybe it's getting engaged in an example of something similar in their life. What did they learn from it, right? And then what can we learn from this case study by going through? You know what I mean? Kind of painting a picture of the educational objective behind that story.
So just the purpose, helping them understand the purpose of it.
Helping them understand
But
the
don't they,
purpose
all
of
the
it.
courses already have that, and I kind of feel we do that ad nauseum. Like I teach English as well.
Yeah.
Each week will be like, here are your learning objectives,
Yeah.
and it'll be 3 pages of that. And at the very end, it'll say, here's the essay you're supposed to write. And by then, 70% of my class hasn't read the bottom, and it's very clear. They didn't even process what that topic is. I think we want to use this technical language. It just goes right over their heads.
Right.
So I agree in theory, but I kind of think that the actual practice that we're doing with it, it's not doing what we want it to do.
So another suggestion, is especially with engineers, is in your notes from the instructor, post some of these things, or in your emails back to them. Bring some real life stories. What I mean?
And you can bring
What do you know? This engineer creates this awesome thing. He wants to take it to the patent office, right? Or take it to somebody, take it to a business proposal meeting, right? What's he gonna have to do? There's a whole lot of technical writing and things like that to go into that, right? So how is he going to take his awesome thing and articulate it to these people, right? So you maybe bring some real life stuff in there, saying where is this going to be used in real life, right? This principle is important, but I'm not just going to tell you it's important, right? I'm going to pose a story to help you understand where it's important in real life. For engineers, for construction workers, I don't care who, what I mean? Everybody uses these principles, right? And so, tell some of that story, especially if it's real stories. My wife was in a psychology class, and they actually analyzed the story of a businessman, high-end, big wig dude on Wall Street or whatever, in New York, that read the story about this school that we couldn't keep teaching in the school because of the violence, and when they were students were literally targeting teachers and things like that. And he just felt impressed that he needed to go and be a part of this school and teach at the school. So he did, and he finally, after about a year of teaching or something, and after headlocks and getting thrown into lockers and things like that, he finally asked us, he said, "Why are you doing this? I gave up this life, to come and teach you. Why are you treating us like this?" And they just said, "We're bored. We're totally bored." He said, "Well, was there anything that I did this last year where you felt like you weren't bored, like there was something worthwhile to your life?" And he said, "Yes, every time you told a story of your real business, of your business experiences." And so he changed his whole way of teaching. And then, and then the story goes on to all of these students in his business class going on to, have the highest producing hot dog stands and all these things, and they're reflected in their life. We're going to have to end, and I apologize. We're not going to get to those other questions. But if you have those written down, what I'd like you to do is go to, there's a QR code if you want, but if you go to this website right here, you want to write down that website. That is a resource document. There's some things I compiled. Sorry, we'll be done in just a sec. Resources that I compiled, and then we actually had a conference last week, and we compiled a few more. And then, but I'd love for you to provide some more ideas on it. Whether it's resources or other ideas. In fact, I'd love for somebody to pose these questions on there and start answering them, right? Throw some bullet points in there on how to answer these questions. How do we do problem-based learning in static online courses, right? So how do we get students off the escalator? How can we use notes from instructors to do problem-based learning or engage students? How do we better use discussion boards to do problem-based learning? So please go to that resource page, throw in some comments. We love it there. Here's the link to the presentation if you want to download that presentation, or the QR code if you want to snap a picture of that. And that's it. Appreciate everybody coming. It was great to talk to you. I wish we had a little more time to explore some things, but technology is what it is sometimes. So I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.